The moon hung low that night, a bright silver coin casting shadows across the quiet fields of Willow Creek Farm. Crops, ripe and heavy with promise, swayed gently in the cool breeze as if whispering secrets. But beneath the tranquility, change was brewing something dark. It was the calm before the storm, the kind that sends chills crawling down your spine. On the edge of town, a band of thieves gathered, their heads huddled together like predatory birds planning a strike. They had watched Willow Creek for weeks, eyeing the farm's isolation and easy access points. "Look at that," one of them sneered, his voice a low growl. They were brimming with confidence, convinced that the unsuspecting farmer was just another mark in their game. But in the heart of the farm, old Tom Miller, the farmer, sensed the shift in the night air. Tom was no stranger to hard work. His hulking frame and sun-kissed skin were living proof of years spent toiling in the earth. He didn't just grow crops, he nurtured life. Each pumpkin, each corn stalk was sown with care, a testament to his labor and love. But along with that devotion came an instinct sharper than any knife. As the night deepened, the thieves moved, silent and shadowy, their excitement fueling their boldness like moths drawn to a flame. They slinked past the weathered barn, eyes glinting with greed. "It's just a farm. Grab the gear, grab the cash." Their laughter echoed between the crops, a sound that shattered the night's stillness. But as they crept closer, a rustle in the tall grass snapped their attention. The thieves froze, hearts pounding like war drums. One whispered, eyes darting nervously. They were questions filled with doubt, a crack in their bravado. Maybe they weren't as invincible as they thought. Meanwhile, Tom, sitting on the porch with a worn-out rocking chair creaking alongside him, squinted into the darkness. He'd often said that the land could speak if you listened closely enough, and tonight it was shouting warnings. He felt the presence of danger, the same way a dog senses a storm. Without hesitation, he hopped off the porch, silence enveloping him like a cloak. He knew the layout of his land better than anyone. Each turn, each clump of bushes held memories. It was his sanctuary. He walked softly, but the earth still groaned under his weight, betraying his advance. Back among the thieves, panic started to seep in as they heard the unmistakable crunch of boots on gravel, punctuating the darkness menacingly. One yelled, the confidence of earlier evaporating into thin air. The atmosphere thickened with tension, fear, and apprehension swirling like a stormy sea. Tom rounded the corner just in time to catch sight of the figures huddled in the moonlight, outlined against the farmhouse background. He knew he needed to act fast. Calling out wasn't an option. He didn't want to alert them to his presence just yet. He took a breath, grounding himself in the moment. He grabbed what he could find. A sturdy pitchfork leaned against the barn. Its wooden handle was cool to the touch, and he felt its weight solid and reassuring. In that instant, the farmer wasn't just a caretaker. He was a protector, the guardian of his land. The band of thieves had finally spotted the old man. Murmurs filled the air, conspiratorial whispers turned into a disagreement. One of them scoffed, attempting to reignite their previous bravado, but doubt hung heavily, each whisper revealing fissures in their confidence. Tom stepped into the open, moonlight reflecting off his steely gaze. "You boys must have taken a wrong turn," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "This is my land." That simple assertion hung in the air, electrifying it. The thieves looked at each other, uncertain. They hadn't expected someone to be home, they hadn't prepared for resistance. "Maybe just a warning, we won't take much," one of them called out, trying to save face. Tom's laugh was harsh, breaking the silence like glass shattering. "You think I'd let you walk away after you've come trespassing on my land?" He gripped the pitchfork tighter, grounding his resolve. Fear began to melt away, replaced by sheer determination. The thieves could sense it. One of them, sensing their leader fall into silence, tried to advance, but Tom was quicker. With a swift motion, he thrust the pitchfork into the ground, punctuating his point. "Back away." The confrontation sent ripples through the air, vibrating with tension. The thieves, their bravado now crumbling, exchanged glances filled with uncertainty and regret. They had sought an easy score, but here was a man, who turned their dreams of riches into nightmares. Tom shook his head. The resolve in his words was like steel, a protector of the land he loved so dearly. Suddenly, a shout pierced the night. It was the sound of the farmer's loyal hound, Duke, bursting from the shadows, a blur of fur and bark. He charged forward, growling like a thunderstorm ready to unleash. The thieves recoiled as if physically struck, the balance shifted once more. One of them yelled, panic replacing their arrogance. As the thieves turned to flee, the night erupted with sound. Tom shouted for them to leave. The closer they got to their escape, the more emboldened he felt. Echoed across the field, a declaration that resonated in every stalk of corn, every patch of soil nourished by his hands. Duke lunged, teeth bared, and only just managed to nip at the fringes of the nearest thief's jacket before they scrambled away, desperation propelling them through the fields. Laughter mixed with the barking filled the air as the chase unfolded like a wild tapestry, the thieves' figures darting into the night, swallowed by the darkness they had sought to exploit. Tom leaned against the barn, panting, adrenaline coursing through him like wildfire. He gazed out over his fields, the upscale view of what he had built visualized in the dim glow of moonlight. It was a moment of triumph, monumental against the backdrop of the serene night. But as the shadows descended back into their familiar places, a sudden thought struck him. He had chased bandits from his land, but at what cost? The world felt more dangerous now. The boundaries he had once felt invulnerable within seemed to falter. Fear and uncertainty crept in like fog. Weeks passed, and Tom continued to attend to his farm, but the chill of that night lingered. The isolation he once cherished felt heavy. He'd won the battle, but the air had shifted. Friends, neighbors, they'd grown distant, consumed by their own struggles. They could never truly understand the demons he wrestled with now, feeling exposed under the weight of uninvited memories. The crescent moon cast silver shadows over the late summer fields when a knock sounded on his door. It was Alan, his neighbor, a kind man with a generous heart. "I heard about what happened, Tom." "You did good," Alan started, resting a hand on the porch railing. A silence hung between them, deep and thoughtful. "But you shouldn't be alone with this," Alan continued, his voice steady. "Let me help you." A ripple of warmth washed over Tom, spreading through him like spring rain. At that moment, he realized something vital. Resilience wasn't just about facing down danger. It was also about relying on those around you, letting go of the overwhelming load he had carried alone. As days turned into weeks, Tom hoed rows of corn alongside Alan. Neighbors began to rally after hearing of his stand against the thieves. The night of fear transformed into a tapestry, woven from the threads of community. People rallied to his side. Those once distant now came together, their hands creating a bond stronger than silent shadows. The band of thieves, empowered by the ego that initially fueled their misguided venture, had assumed they'd face little opposition. They had underestimated old Tom and the spirit of Willow Creek. In learning to face his fears, Tom had ignited something much larger, a lesson shared within a community about strength, resilience, and the immense power of standing together. In the life of a farmer, each season brought new challenges, and the night of tension became a defining moment that wrinkled time. Old Tom stood in the middle of his thriving farm, feeling richer than ever, not in coins, but in the warmth of shared strength and connection that blossomed beautifully in the aftermath of fear. And as the sun dipped low, casting a golden hue over the crops, Tom smiled, knowing that in the dance of shadows and light, he had found courage not just in standing alone, but in reaching out, hand in hand, heart to heart, forever reclaiming his rightful place in the world he loved. The night was still, cloaked in a thick veil of dark clouds, hiding the stars like secrets waiting to be uncovered. On the outskirts of town, Willow Creek Farm lay nestled between sprawling fields and shadowy woods, an oasis of tranquility. But that tranquility was about to be shattered. Under a flickering street lamp, 4 men stood huddled together, sharing a low, conspiratorial laugh, their eyes glinting with mischief. They were not just any men. They were a band of thieves who longed for an easy score. Tonight, they had set their sights on the farm. "Look at this place," one of them said, gesturing toward the dim light filtering from the farmhouse window. "Old Man Miller thinks he's safe out here." The words dripped with arrogance and greed, a cocktail that fueled their spirits. What the thieves didn't know was that old Tom Miller, the farmer, had been watching too. He had seen the shadows creeping closer, sensed the shift in the night. Tom was no stranger to hard work. His weathered hands bore the marks of years spent toiling in the soil, growing crops that fed not just his family but the entire community. Each pumpkin and ear of corn represented long days and sleepless nights, a labor of love that ran deep in his veins. Sitting on the porch, Tom leaned back in his rocking chair, the wood creaking softly beneath him. He felt the air heavy with danger, a warning from the earth itself. As the laughter of the thieves echoed in the night, Tom's resolve solidified. He might be old, but he wasn't weak. After years of facing storms, droughts, and hardships, he was ready to protect what was his. The thieves crept across the yard, slick with confidence, moving like shadows weaving through the crops. "Let's grab whatever we can and get out. This old guy won't put up a fight," one of them sneered, but inside, doubt gnawed at the edges of their bravado. What if this farm wasn't as easy as it looked? As they approached the barn, the sound of rustling made them freeze. One whispered, his voice barely above a breath. Moments of uncertainty hung heavy, like a loaded gun just waiting for the trigger to be pulled. Meanwhile, Tom had slipped off the porch, his heart pounding with purpose. He was no stranger to danger either. He had once fought against nature's fury and came out stronger on the other side. In that moment, as he crept closer to the barn, crouched low like a coiled spring ready to release, he felt fear turning into determination. He grabbed the pitchfork leaning against the barn, a simple tool, yet in his hands it was a formidable weapon. The thieves, sensing the shift in the air, exchanged glances filled with unease. "Maybe we should just leave," one of them suggested, attempting to mask the tremor in his voice. But the lure of easy riches was too great, and greed all but silenced their better judgment. And then, just as Tom would have rolled the dice with destiny, he erupted onto the scene, pitchfork raised like a knight defending his castle. His voice was steady, an unyielding tone that resonated in the night. The thieves, initially taken aback by the sight of the old man standing firm against them, hesitated. A sudden wave of panic swept through their ranks. This wasn't part of the plan. They were expecting an empty house, not a guardian resolute in his purpose. "Come on, he's just an old man," one of the thieves scoffed, trying to rally the group, but the bravado was slipping away like water through their fingers. The tension remained thick, suffocating them as they fumbled for confidence. Another suggested, glancing nervously at the pitchfork glinting in the moonlight, "It's just a few dollars." Tom, breathing in the cool night air, felt a surge of power. Each breath drew in courage, each heartbeat resonating with the strength of his convictions. "You're trespassing on my land," he said again, this time with more fierceness, grip tightening around the pitchfork's handle. And just like that, the air shifted again. With a bark that sliced through the tension, Duke, Tom's loyal dog, burst forth from the shadows. His growl echoed like thunder, a warning to the intruders that this man was not alone. He had a fierce companion ready to defend. The thieves turned to run, and Tom, fueled by adrenaline, shouted after them, "Get off my land." The words were a battle cry, striking fear into their hearts. As Duke charged, snapping at their heels, the thieves stumbled into the night, panic enveloping them like a thick fog. Breathless, Tom stood firm, his heart hammering in his chest. The rush of triumph was intoxicating, driving away any lingering doubt. But as the adrenaline faded, a new fear crept in, the fear of being alone, the burden of uncertainty weighing heavily. The weeks that followed were eerily quiet. The field seemed to whisper, but now it carried a different kind of tension. Every rustle in the wind felt like the echo of his encounter with the thieves. Tom continued his daily toil, but that night had left its mark. One evening, as twilight began to cast long shadows over the land, Tom found himself wandering into town, needing to break the silence. As he entered the general store, he could sense a shift in the atmosphere. People were talking in hushed tones, but when they saw him, their conversations halted. A neighbor whispered, eyes wide with a mix of reverence and disbelief. At first, Tom merely shrugged, but as he heard murmurs of admiration, he realized something important. He wasn't alone in this fight. In the following weeks, stories of Tom's bravery spread through the townsfolk like wildfire. He had become a symbol, a source of inspiration. One day, while working in the fields with Duke trotting by his side, he noticed a few of his neighbors approaching with smiles and greetings. "I heard what happened, Tom," said Alan, an old friend with hands roughened by labor but eyes bright with respect. "You stood up for what's right. You fought for your home." Tom's heart swelled. Bravery was no longer his alone to bear. It transformed into a collective strength as others joined him. Each hand that grasped a tool brought renewed hope. They worked side by side, not just for the crops, but for something deeper, a bond that was forged in adversity. As autumn rolled in and the leaves painted the horizon with brilliant colors, Tom took pride in the fruits of their labor. The farm flourished, full of life, but more importantly, it thrived as a community effort. Their laughter echoed across the fields, filling the air with warmth, a stark contrast to the chills of earlier nights. But as the days grew shorter and colder, the memory of that fateful night hung like a specter, a constant reminder of how fragile their peace had become. They'd kept watch, ensuring that they wouldn't face danger alone again, but the unease lingered in the back of Tom's mind. What if the thieves returned? What if they were bolder this time? And then, one fateful evening, Tom spotted movement at the edge of the field. There they were, shadows again, crawling back like a snake returning to its nest. Fear gripped him as he watched their dark forms, creeping toward the barn, but this time he wasn't alone. With a newfound sense of purpose, he rushed to gather Alan and the others. The old fear transformed into fuel for a plan. "We're not letting them rob us again. We fight together," he stated, conviction radiating from him like the first light of dawn breaking a long night. As they gathered by the barn, an electrifying tension built in the air again. They felt the weight of their retaliation looming, a fight worth every ounce of their strength. One of the townsfolk hissed, pointing towards the thieves. Hope and fear danced in their hearts as adrenaline propelled them forward, each step grounding them deeper in unity. Tom strode forward, pitchfork in hand, this time not just a farmer or an old man. He was a warrior now, emboldened by the bonds of community he had forged. He shouted again, but this time it was a rallying call, echoing off the walls of the barn and piercing the night air. The thieves froze, caught between fear and the reality of the moment. But they weren't the ones who would dictate the outcome anymore. Tom and his neighbors moved as one, an unbreakable line of courage confronting the darkness. Duke barked fiercely, lunging towards them with the ferocity of a lion defending its pride. The band of thieves, realizing they were vastly outnumbered, began to falter, their bravado evaporating like dew in the morning sun. With newfound strength and fire in their hearts, Tom and his neighbors stepped forward, driving the thieves back, a powerful force shielding their home. They knew then that even in the face of danger, they were united by love for the land they toiled on together. And as the moon rose high, casting a silver glow over the fields, Tom felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. They had faced the darkness together and emerged not just as farmers but as a family. The land, once merely a collection of crops, became a symbol of resilience, strength, and an unbreakable spirit. Under the vastness of the night sky, amid the rustling of crops, the warmth of community filled the air with strength, the heart of Willow Creek shining brightly against the shadows. The stillness of the night settled over Willow Creek Farm like a thick fog, enveloping the fields and the old farmhouse in an eerie silence. The moon, full and bright, bathed everything in a soft, silvery light, casting elongated shadows that danced across the open spaces. Inside the farmhouse, Tom Miller, a seasoned farmer, sat on his porch, rocking back and forth, the rhythmic creak of the wood almost soothing him into a sense of peace. But peace can be a deceptive cloak, one that often hides danger lurking just beyond the edges of light. A few miles away in the dark and tangled streets of town, 4 men gathered, their faces shadowed, excitement flickering in their eyes. They were thieves and they'd been scoping out Willow Creek for weeks. With a whispered conversation laced with bravado, they plotted their move. "It's just a farm," one of them said, the hint of a sneer on his lips. "Old man Miller probably doesn't even keep a watchful eye." As Tom shifted in his chair, a low growl sounded from beside him. Duke, his loyal German shepherd, sensed the tension crackling in the air like static before a storm. Tom felt it too, an itch at the back of his mind, a feeling that something was amiss. He leaned forward, scanning the edges of the fields, his instincts honed from years of working the land. The thieves moved like shadows, synchronized and swift, their breath hitching with anticipation as they neared the fence of the farm. "No one knows we're here," one murmured, though doubt was creeping into his voice like weeds in a garden. They climbed over the fence, excitement pulsing through them, visions of easy riches dancing in their heads, but they hadn't counted on Duke. The moment the rickety boards creaked under their weight, the dog sensed something was wrong. He leaped to his feet, barking fiercely, his deep, resonating growl echoing across the stillness. The sound sliced through the night like a warning bell. Tom's heart raced. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped off the porch, illuminating the path ahead. The thieves froze mid-step, caught between alarm and resolve. One whispered, his voice quaking. They hadn't prepared for a guardian, much less an alert dog. Another shouted as he turned to bolt back toward the fence. Panic took hold and the group scattered. Tom stepped into the moonlight, the flashlight beam sweeping over the ground, revealing their silhouettes as they sprinted away. He called out, voice steady, the kind of firmness that comes from years of hard work and defense. They dashed across the fields, their hearts pounding, the thrill of their original bravado transforming into sheer panic. They hadn't anticipated this. They were mere boys playing against a man, but the old farmer wasn't just fighting for his crops. He was battling for his very home. As Tom flicked the flashlight back to the house, he realized they hadn't just been after cash or goods. They had sought something deeper, a sense of control and power in a life that had all but stripped them of it. But Tom knew that each ear of corn he tended, each seed he planted, came with the weight of responsibility. This was his kingdom, no matter how humble. With the thief's silhouettes disappearing into the night, adrenaline coursed through Tom's veins. He could feel a storm of emotions brewing inside him, rage, fear, but also determination. Grabbing the pitchfork from beside the barn, he prepared for anything that might come next. The first confrontation had been unexpected, but he was far from unprepared. Back in town, the thieves regrouped, their confidence shattered under the weight of humiliation. One exclaimed, panting from fear, "It was just a farmer." Empty bravado fled their lips as they began to recognize the truth: a humble farmer could possess more strength and resilience than they ever anticipated. "Maybe we need a better plan," another one suggested, and they muttered about going back, convinced that a second attempt could yield better results. But beneath their chatter, the fear of encountering Tom again began to root itself deep in their hearts, a quiet understanding playing on their minds like a haunting melody. Meanwhile, life moved on for Tom. As days turned to weeks, he tended to his crops with a persistent diligence. Yet he couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that lingered like a shadow trailing behind him. He fortified his security, making sure no intruder could easily access his home again. But he also found camaraderie among townsfolk who heard tales of his bravery. They began to visit more, offering help and company. "You stood up for yourself, Tom," one neighbor said, admiration etched across his face. And with each word, he felt buoyed, the weight of survival lifting just a bit as he realized this wasn't just a farmer's fight anymore. It had sparked a sense of community that had long been fading in the increasing isolation of modern life. Tom began to host gatherings, dinner nights where laughter rang inside his home and friendships grew like the crops in the fields. The warmth spread through the farm, replacing fear with solidarity. But still, in the quiet hours of the night, his thoughts strayed back to the band of thieves that had dared to intrude upon his land. Then came the day when everything turned. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the fields a golden hue as Tom finished his evening chores. As he boarded the old tractor, he noticed a commotion in town. Groups of people gathered in clusters, whispering intently, the atmosphere thick with suspense. He asked, stepping closer to the crowd that had formed outside the general store. "Those thieves," someone muttered, shaking his head. "They're back in town." Tom's heart sank. Their earlier encounter hadn't deterred them. As fear coursed through him, the community around him felt the ripple, those hard-won friendships tightening into a singular bond of purpose. With unwavering resolve, Tom rallied the townsfolk with a steadfast determination. "We can't allow them to take our peace, our way of life," he asserted, drawing strength from those around him. Murmurs of agreement echoed in the crowd. Ideas began to fall from their lips, ideas for blocking paths, setting up lookout points, and standing guard over what they had fought so fiercely to build. Each suggestion further fortified their collective spirit. Fear turned into a battle cry, igniting them from within. That night, they set a plan in motion. Tom and a small group of courageous neighbors stayed vigilant while others formed an alert chain, ready to respond the moment they caught sight of the approaching threat. The moon hung high, illuminating the fields, casting shadows that danced with purpose. In the stillness of the night, the sound of rustling startled Tom. Heart racing, he raised a hand, signaling for silence. Nervously, the group huddled close, fully aware that the time had come. "Keep alert," he whispered, voice taut with tension. And then, suddenly, the thieves appeared, creeping towards the barn like ghosts in a fog. They glanced around, eyes scanning the horizon, unaware they were moving into the very heart of a tempest. With resolve, Tom drew the pitchfork, fingers bruising against the wood, his heartbeat sinking with the anticipation rising in the air. He yelled, voice ringing out like a cannon shot, shattering the quiet. The group sprang into action. The element of surprise played in their favor as they encircled the would-be intruders, backed into a corner. One of the thieves shouted, both shocked and terrified. Their bravado, once dominating, was reduced to panic. The tables had turned, and the hunters were now the hunted. Tom challenged, stepping forward, his gaze fierce. "You underestimated what's worth fighting for." Suddenly, realizing they were vastly outnumbered, the thieves turned to run, abandoning their earlier ambitions in the face of the unexpected might of united strength. Someone shouted, and they fled like shadows dissipating into the dawn. A tremendous roar erupted from the townsfolk, adrenaline surging. They had faced down the danger and emerged victorious, and the triumph surged through them like a wildfire. As the celebration rolled into laughter and relief, Tom felt their collective energy wrapping around him, filling both heart and spirit. Amidst the revelry, he realized that their fight was never just against a handful of thieves. It was a testament to the power of community, to love and resilience forged in the fires of adversity. They had defended their homes and families, reconnected with each other in ways they had thought long lost to the passage of time. Somewhere beneath that bright moon, as darkness wrapped around them, they carved light from their unity, a flicker ignited in the heart of Willow Creek. The farm was more than land. It was a sanctuary, a space where courage thrived and hope blossomed throughout every row of crops. As laughter echoed into the night, Tom took a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill his lungs. He stood among friends, comrades forged through trials, knowing that together they could face whatever came their way. They were no longer just farmers. They were guardians of their land, a band of brothers and sisters ready to face any storm, a family bound together by love, determination, and a fierce spirit that refused to back down. And as they held on to their hard-won victory, they knew they could face the dawn together, no longer just watching shadows but chasing them away, full of life and boundless hope. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver glow across the fields of Willow Creek Farm. An eerie stillness enveloped the land, broken only by the soft rustle of corn stalks swaying in the breeze. The night felt peaceful, perhaps too peaceful, as if the world was holding its breath. But beneath this calm surface, danger lurked, just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Under the cover of darkness, a band of thieves huddled together in the shadows, their breaths shallow with excitement. "This job will be simple," whispered one, glancing at the expansive fields and the old farmhouse barely visible against the night sky. An old man and a dog. They plotted their course, driven by greed and the thrill of an easy score. But their bravado masked a stark reality. They had no idea who they were up against. They hadn't met Tom Miller, the farmer who had spent decades cultivating not just crops but resilience. Meanwhile, inside the farmhouse, Tom sat in his favorite rocking chair, the wood creaking softly beneath him. At 70 years old, he had weathered more storms than most. Tonight, however, something felt different. Duke, his loyal German shepherd, lay at his feet, ears perked up, restless. Tom felt it too, a shift in the air, the kind that comes right before a tempest. In the shadows, the thieves made their move, slipping silently through the tall grass. They crept closer, their hearts pounding with excitement and fear, the two emotions dancing dangerously close together. "Just a little further," one urged, his voice a whisper, barely above the wind. "We can get the old man's cash, maybe some tools." As they closed in on the barn, Duke suddenly lifted his head, nostrils flaring as he detected the intruders. The hairs on his back stood up, and in a split second he was off like a bullet, bounding toward the creeping figures. One of the thieves gasped, eyes wide with panic. Just a dog. But in that moment doubt rippled through their ranks. They hadn't accounted for the old man's defender. The night exploded into sound as Duke's bark shattered the stillness, echoing across the fields. Tom's senses sharpened. He sprang into action, grabbing the flashlight near the door and quickening his pace. His heart raced, but it wasn't fear that fueled him. It was the protection of his home. He barked, calling his companion back, but the dog had already charged forward, fierce and determined. The thieves froze, completely unprepared for this turn of events. They watched, mouths agape, as the Grand Protector lunged toward them with ferocity. One shouted, the bravado in his voice vanishing like smoke in the wind. They turned and bolted, their plans unraveling faster than they could comprehend. Tom emerged from the shadows, the powerful beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. "You think you can just walk onto my land?" he yelled, grounding his resolve. He took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs, and charged forward, pitchfork in hand. The farmer's courage in that moment was primal, instinctual. He wasn't just defending his property, he was fighting for his life, the life he had built with his own hands. Each step forward was a testament to his spirit, a warning shot to these would-be bandits that they had underestimated the heart of a farmer. As the thieves scattered across the fields, Tom felt invigorated. With Duke by his side, there was no turning back. The thieves might have thought the farm was easy pickings, but they quickly learned that resilience and resolve could turn the simplest of places into an impenetrable fortress. He rushed forward, his intention clear, not just to defend but to reclaim peace. The moonlight illuminated the determination on his face, transforming him into something far greater than a farmer. He was a warrior defending his realm. Silhouettes moved in the fields like shadows, panic gripping the thieves as they realized they were trapped. One gasped as he glanced back at the figure of Tom, pitchfork raised high. Every muscle in his body was taut, ready for confrontation. "Look, they're just a bunch of idiots," the supposed leader replied, masking his own fear with bravado. But even as he spoke, he knew reality was closing in. They had thought they could tangle with a simple farmer and come out on top, but they had grossly misjudged their opponent. Tom had already rallied his fierce friend Duke, who moved to deter any further advances from the thieves, growling and barking until they were utterly disoriented. The dog's loyalty transformed from mere companionship into powerful defense. Tom shouted again, and the intensity in his voice made it clear he wouldn't back down. In a desperate attempt to escape their self-made nightmare, the thieves began to backtrack, but it was too late. Tom edged closer, ready to defend, knowing each word mattered. "You think this is just an easy job?" shouted one of the thieves, the fear in his voice undeniable. They scrambled, turning to flee, knowing they had messed with the wrong man. As they reached the fence, Tom and Duke were hot on their heels, the thief's desperate scrambling echoing in the night air. In that moment, adrenaline surged through Tom, a feeling of empowerment settling deep in his bones. They were no longer just thieves. They were fugitives, panicking and retreating against a force far beyond what they could comprehend. Once the thieves disappeared into the woods, a charged silence filled the air, broken only by the distant hooting of an owl. Tom turned toward Duke, who had now settled back, panting heavily but alert. Tom exhaled, grounding himself. The calm that followed the storm transformed into contemplation. As Tom returned to the house, reality settled in. He felt a knot in his stomach, a mix of relief and concern. Was this confrontation merely the beginning? Would the thieves return, emboldened by their failure to succeed? That question loomed large over him. Over the next few days, Tom scoured through his belongings, reinforcing doors and windows, every creak in the wood echoing a sense of vulnerability. He reached out to neighbors, sharing what had happened. Beneath the surface of everyday life, their shared stories revealed the truth, a deep-seated fear shadowing their lives. One evening, as the sun sank low, painted the sky in shades of fiery orange, Tom gathered the townsfolk at the local community center. They shared their own encounters with theft, tools stolen, livestock disappearing, a growing unease settling over the landscape of their lives. "We can't be afraid," Tom declared, standing before the crowd, voice steady and unwavering. "This is our home, our land." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, a wave of support washing over him. "The thieves may have thought this would be easy," he continued. Each person who spoke added fuel to an emerging fire of defiance. Stories of resilience and courage flourished, forging a bond that transcended their individual fears. United, they planned, strategizing ways to secure their homes and stand watch if threats returned. As the night deepened, a new resolve took root, one that rippled through the heart of Willow Creek. Nights became filled with laughter, camaraderie stitching together each soul, a shared promise to watch over one another. Tom felt a warmth growing, a vibrant pulse of hope woven into the fabric of the community. But in the quiet hours of the night, a shadow loomed over that sanctuary of hope. The band of thieves, bearing scars from their earlier encounter, plotted their return. They gathered in the same smoky bar, whispers spilling out like poison. "We need to show that farmer he's not as tough as he thinks," the leader declared, his eyes narrowing with determination. They schemed, devising a plan to return to Willow Creek. Their confidence returned, fueled by anger and frustration, underestimating what had been ignited in the hearts of the townsfolk. They thought they could return to pick off easy supplies from the farm, but the truth was now crystal clear. Their overconfidence had made them reckless. Under the cloak of night, a chilling wind blew as they approached the farm again, heads hanging low. This time they were ready. Traps had been set, defenses reinforced, eyes wide with vigilance. Tom, armed with his pitchfork and flanked by brave townsfolk who had banded together in solidarity, stood watch. Duke remained alert, a fierce guardian ready to protect his own. "They're coming," Tom said, heart pounding, feeling the tide of fear swell in his chest. But he pushed it down, fueling it into something far more powerful: courage. The shadows emerged, creeping toward the barn with a mixture of arrogance and desperation. They were swept up in confidence, convinced they would reclaim their false sense of power. But as they moved closer, Tom stepped into the light, a beam of composure and strength. He called out, voice resonating with authority. The moment froze, time clinging to the air, holding its breath. The thieves, caught off guard, exchanged worried glances. This time it wasn't just old Tom and Duke. It was a network of unwavering support. Each person, holding tight to their resolve, surrounded the band of thieves like a powerful tide rising against them. Shouted another townsfolk, brandishing a shovel, ready to defend what they had built. The united front shattered any sense of security the thieves had left. Panic reigned as the realization dawned on them. They were not only facing a farmer, they were contending with a community awakened to their purpose. The band of thieves turned to flee, realizing they had made a grave mistake in underestimating the resilience of the land and the people who worked it. They stumbled over their own feet, the darkness closing in as they turned tail. Tom called again, his commanding voice stirring the resolve around him, flowing through the tense air like wildfire. They retreated, fear of the unknown pushing them farther and farther away. Breathless and exhilarated, Tom and his neighbors stood together in unity, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. They had faced down the darkness and emerged victorious, a testament to the unwavering will of those who loved their land fiercely. In the moments that followed, laughter erupted, relief pouring out like rain after a long drought. They embraced one another, hearts swelling with pride, each person reminded of their strength. They had stood firm, rallied against a shared threat, and emerged stronger, intertwined in a bond that would only grow. As the sun rose the next day, illuminating the fields with golden light, Tom looked out over his beloved farm and felt a wave of peace wash over him. This was home, the soil he had nurtured, the crops that thrived, the community that felt like family. They had reclaimed not only their space but also their spirits. The band of thieves may have thought the farm was easy pickings, but they were profoundly mistaken. Here, amidst the crop rows and the laughter of friends, Tom knew the truth. Strength lies in unity, and together they could face anything that dared invade their sanctuary. The battle for Willow Creek had only begun, but as they stood shoulder to shoulder, ready for whatever came next, they knew they were not just guarding a farm. They were protecting the very essence of their lives, their hopes, and their dreams. A heavy mist rolled across the fields that night, cloaking Willow Creek Farm in a thick blanket of uncertainty. Underneath the hazy shroud, shadows crept closer, too deliberate to be mere figments of imagination. In the distance, the silhouette of the old barn stood stoic while the crescent moon cast a pale light over the crops, swaying gently in the cool breeze. Far from this serene nighttime scene, a band of thieves gathered in a dimly lit alley in town, their breaths visible in the crisp night air. "Just a farmer and his dog," the ringleader said, a cocky smile spreading across his face. The others nodded, an unsettling mix of eagerness and stupidity settling over them like a fog. They had scouted the place for weeks. They saw the worn-out tractor, the rusty old barn, and the simple house that Tom Miller called home. To their eyes, it represented a gold mine waiting to be cracked open. But what they didn't know was that old Tom, with his years of sweat and toil, had a spirit no thief could easily break. Tom sat on his porch, rocking gently in the old wooden chair that creaked with each motion. He watched the fields, always the caretaker, sensing shifts in the night as only a farmer could. Duke, his loyal dog with a coat as dark as midnight, lay at his feet, one ear perked up alert to the world around him. "Something's not right, boy," Tom muttered, squinting into the darkness. The wind rustled the corn stalks, a low whisper that seemed to echo his concern. As the moon sank lower, casting increasingly long shadows, Tom felt a prickle of unease creep down his spine. The band of thieves moved quickly, hearts racing with a dangerous mix of fear and excitement. "Just grab whatever you can find," one urged, his voice shaking slightly. Their footsteps were hurried, and the closer they got to the farm, the more the shadows seemed to dance around them. Suddenly Duke was on his feet, bristling at the cool night air. With a low growl, he let the intruders know they had been detected. The thieves froze, adrenaline flooding their veins. One of them hissed, eyes wide, but there was no time to second-guess. Tom sprung into action, grabbing the flashlight from inside the house. He commanded, the pitch of his voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline. He stepped off the porch and into the darkness, illuminating a path ahead. The beam of light pierced through the fog, revealing the chaos of the night. Tom shouted, his voice echoing across the field. "I see you." The boldness in his tone cut through the air like a blade. The thieves could almost taste the steel. Panic surged through the group, their bravado evaporating like dew under the morning sun. "Run!" one of them shouted, eyes darting as they turned to bolt back to the safety of the darkness. They stumbled through the damp grass, confusion gripping them tighter than fear. But Tom was ready. He had spent years defending his land, and heart pounding, he was prepared once more. With Duke at his side, Tom wasn't just a farmer defending his home. He was a guardian, ready to protect what was rightfully his. He yelled, the mix of anger and defiance fueling his steps. As the thieves scrambled through the tall grass, they hadn't anticipated the blunt reality of the farmer's resolve. One of them cried, panic overtaking logic as they tried to find their footing in the terrain that felt foreign and hostile. Tom moved with purpose, the pitchfork in his hand a true reflection of his unyielding spirit. "This is my land." With each step, he felt an intoxicating surge of energy, a rush of defiance coursing through him. But the thieves weren't entirely abandoned by their bravado. The ringleader shouted, his voice quivering. In reality, they were stumbling into a storm they could not weather. Tom edged closer, knowing that intimidation was his greatest ally. "You're not welcome here." But in that moment, the band of thieves found themselves caught between two fears: the fear of an old farmer with a pitchfork ready for battle, and the fear of the impending consequences of being discovered. The commotion drew the attention of other farmers in the vicinity, who had heard the commotion and were quick to lend a hand. Like a pack of wolves sensing an intruder, they rallied together, united in their defense. The old farm that seemed so sprawling and isolated transformed into an impenetrable fortress as Tom led the charge. "Hey!" shouted one of Tom's neighbors, brandishing a garden hoe, a makeshift weapon ready for the unexpected. The additional voices added strength to Tom's authority, shaking the thieves' confidence even more. Panic bubbled again, fueling their frantic retreat. With Duke barking ferociously, the thieves turned to flee, their shadows merging with the night. One exclaimed, his breath ragged with fear. But it was too late. They were overtaken with a rush of terror fueled by desperation. Their fast-paced footsteps echoed in the stillness as they hastily retreated, leaving behind their earlier bravado. Tom stood tall, pitchfork clutched tightly, feeling a flush of triumph roll through him. They had thought it would be an easy heist, but they were woefully mistaken. Yet as the adrenaline fade set in, a gnawing uncertainty began to grow. Tom turned to his neighbors, gratitude radiating through him. "Thank you all. Together we stood strong," he said, relief washing over him. "But we must remain vigilant." In the days that followed, a palpable energy surged through Willow Creek. There was a newfound caution in their hearts, and conversations were held in hushed tones as fear danced among them. Tom strengthened his defenses, boarding up windows and securing doors. Yet with every creak of wood, he could feel the shadows of doubt creeping back in. That thought resonated. Townsfolk began gathering more often, sharing stories and laughter. They were no longer just neighbors, but a community galvanized by a shared mission. Old friendships rekindled while new alliances formed, stoked by the flames of indignation. But deep down, Tom knew the thieves would not rest. They were desperate and reckless, a dangerous combination. The threat simmered at the back of his mind, each night becoming a silent reminder of their audacity, of how they considered an easy farm an opportunity ripe for the taking. One evening, while tending to his crops, a familiar silhouette caught his eye in the distance. It was Alan, a neighbor he had known for years. "You've got to be careful, Tom," Alan cautioned, concern etched across his face. The news sent waves of dread through Tom, but instead of crumbling, it ignited a fire inside him. "We can't let them rob us of our peace. We must band together and strengthen our watch," Tom declared, determination echoing through the fields. So the townsfolk came together, once again finding strength in numbers. They developed a rotating watch system, taking shifts to guard the farm at night. Each person felt a responsibility, not merely for Tom's safety but for their own. It stirred a sense of hope in their hearts, a reminder that they lived for more than just crops, they lived for community. Then came the night when everything came to a head. Darkness wrapped around the fields like a shroud, and the watchful eyes illuminated the horizon. The whispers of wind sang ominous tales, warning of dangers yet unseen. Tom stood at the edge of his property, Duke at his side, his heart racing with anticipation. The moon hung high, casting silver beams across the land, a stark contrast to the shadows lurking just beyond. Suddenly, a rustle sounded from the wood line. The watchmen exchanged nervous glances. A voice hissed, barely above a whisper. Tom felt his face harden with resolve. "This time let's give them a welcome they won't forget," he said, the edge in his voice prompting the others into action. Steeling themselves, they spread out, forming a line along the perimeter, armed with their makeshift weapons. They were ready, and the thieves didn't stand a chance against the united front. As shadows emerged from the trees, the tension hung heavily in the air. "All right, boys," the ringleader barked, confidence reinflated. But Tom stepped into view, pitchfork raised high, the moonlight glinting off its sharp metal. "Not today," Tom shouted, the power in his voice reverberating around them, shaking the very ground they stood upon. The band of thieves faltered as they realized they were outmatched, not just by one farmer, but by the strength of a community that refused to back down. One of the thieves screamed, and panic erupted among them as they saw Tom's neighbors surrounding them from all sides. They stumbled backward, panic squeezing through their bodies, no longer the invaders but prey hunted in their chase for easy pickings. With Duke leading the charge, barking ferociously, the farmers pushed forward, never allowing their backs to falter. A voice roared and the collective force surged, ready to protect what was rightfully theirs. In the chaos of the tug-of-war, the thieves realized they could not win. They turned and fled, crashing through the brush, desperately seeking escape. The victorious shouts from the farmers echoed through the night, a blend of jubilation and relief. They had triumphed, not just over the thieves but over the very fears that had threatened to consume them. As dawn broke, bathing the land in warm light, Tom looked out over the fields filled with possibilities. They were more than a collection of crops. They were a symbol of newfound strength and solidarity. Together, they had fought against darkness and emerged into the light, proving that courage is often ignited in the face of adversity. In the aftermath of that fateful night, Willow Creek Farm blossomed with renewed vigor. Tom and his neighbors continued to protect one another, cultivating not just their fields but also their spirits, nourished by resilience and bonds that would only grow deeper with each passing season. The band of thieves had thought the farm would be easy pickings, but they were gravely mistaken. And in their retreat, the real treasure of Willow Creek emerged: community, courage, and an unwavering spirit that would not yield to fear. The moon hung low, casting a silver glow over Willow Creek Farm. It painted the cornfields in shades of shimmering white and dark shadows. A biting chill brushed past as the wind rustled the leaves, whispering secrets of the night. If you listened closely enough, you might have heard the soft, rhythmic pulse of life that filled this land, a pulse that spoke of hard work, unity, and determination. But tonight, a different kind of energy hung in the air. Just beyond the fields, a band of thieves lurked in the underbrush, their eyes glinting with mischief and greed. They crouched low, peering through the mist toward the farmhouse, the heart of the farm. "This is going to be a cakewalk," one of them sneered, confidence masking the tremor in his voice. "It's just an old man and a dog." They thought they could just waltz in like this was a one-act play, a puppet show for their own amusement, as if the land wasn't protected by years of sweat and toil. They didn't know Tom Miller, the farmer who had poured his very soul into growing this land, the man who had weathered every storm, both literal and figurative, that life had thrown at him. Inside the farmhouse, Tom sat on his worn porch, the wood creaking softly beneath him. He was no stranger to the dark. It had been his companion for many years. Duke, his loyal German shepherd, lay at his feet, his watchful eyes scanning the horizon. Tom could feel it, a shift in the stillness. A wayward breeze stirred, carrying the scent of fear and uncertainty. "Something's out there, Duke," he muttered, leaning forward, sensing the pull of instinct deep within him. The thieves crept closer, their excitement rising like steam from a boiling pot. They could taste the sweet thrill of easy pickings, the lure of cash and tools that could be theirs for the taking. "Let's split up once we're inside," suggested a shorter man, slick with bravado. What they didn't realize was that even the most tranquil surface could hide a storm beneath. With every step they took toward the farmhouse, the ground beneath their feet mirrored the very heartbeat of the land, waiting and watching. With a sudden rustle, Duke's ears perked up, and a low growl reverberated from deep within him. It was a sound that cut through the night, transforming the atmosphere from casual mischief to high alert. Tom stood up, instincts kicking in. "Duke, stay close," he commanded. He grabbed a flashlight, the metallic cold of its body grounding him. He stepped into the night, illuminating the path ahead, determined to protect what was his at all costs. The thieves froze, their bravado cracking under the weight of uncertainty. One of them whispered, eyes wide as he caught sight of the old farmer emerging from the shadows. The ambiguity of their plan evaporated like the mist that surrounded them. Tom called, his voice steady, unnervingly calm. But fear is a strange thing. It can twist a person in unexpected ways. Instead of retreating, one of the thieves, a wiry young man with desperate eyes, shouted back, "It's just an old man." In that instant, Tom felt the full weight of the moment pressing down on him. He wasn't just defending a farm. He was standing against a wave of arrogance and entitlement, facing men who believed they could govern his life with sheer force and greed. Duke lunged forward, barking ferociously, teeth bared. The thieves recoiled, uncertainty flooding their hearts. Tom tightened his grip on the flashlight, its beam piercing the darkness, bringing their shadows into stark relief. He stepped forward, the pitchfork still resting nearby. He shouted, a primal scream fueled by years of hard work and sacrifice. This wasn't just about defending property. It was about dignity, respect, and honoring the cycles of the land that had nourished him. At that moment the decision was made. The thieves turned and bolted, their bravado crumbling under the weight of fear. Shouted the wiry one, panic bringing a cruel edge to his voice. No easy pickings here, just a guardian armed with love for his land and a loyal dog eager to defend its master. The scene unfolded like a movie where the heroes find their footing at the last moment. Tom knew he had to protect what he'd nurtured, and he felt an energy surge within him. He chased after them, the pitchfork clutched firmly in his hand, heart racing, determination fueling every step. He bellowed, cutting through the night air. The farm, once a simple sanctuary, echoed back as if joining in the confrontation. A deeper fear gripped the thieves as they stumbled over their own feet, their earlier bravado fading. One of them shouted, eyes wide with desperation. They hadn't anticipated resistance. They were thieves, not fighters. With Duke by his side, Tom pressed on, a force united, standing firm against those who thought they could take with impunity. They reached the fence, but there was no escape from the combined forces unfolding against them. Tom shouted, and his voice rang out like thunder. It rallied the spirits of neighbors who had been watching from afar. They moved like shadows gathering strength, stepping into the moonlight. With the command of a seasoned farmer who knew the land like the back of his hand, Tom shouted again, "You're not welcome here." As if responding to his embodying spirit, the ground felt solid beneath his feet. Surprisingly, it was a surge of confidence that elevated him, familiar and powerful. What had once felt like a solitary struggle transformed into a gathering storm of community, intertwining lives and hearts woven together against a common threat. More townsfolk emerged, seeing the chaos unfold. Alan, a neighbor with broad shoulders and a hearty laugh, ran forward. "I heard the commotion." Tom shouted, pointing toward the retreating figures that were scrambling away like insects scurrying from the light. The thieves stumbled into the woods, their breath heavy with panic. The very air around Tom seemed electrifying. They had thought this farm would be easy pickings. They were woefully mistaken. As the thieves slipped into the underbrush, Tom felt the tension release, replaced by a thread of relief. He exclaimed, and cheers erupted among the crowd that had gathered in support. But the victory was bittersweet and Tom's heart still raced. Realization dawned on him. The fear that danced just outside the farmhouse was not gone. It was still lurking, hungry and waiting. They had managed to push back the immediate danger, but would it return? The sun dipped low the following day, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Tom gathered the neighbors once more, the sense of urgency hanging like a dark cloud. "We need to be vigilant. They won't stop," he said, his voice firm. There was a murmuring agreement from the gathered townsfolk. They considered pooling their resources into a watch team, rotating shifts to keep the farm safe. Unity flourished around the idea, a spirit of resilience that rippled like waves breaking along the shore. Week after week passed, and with each day, Tom and his neighbors worked harder. They not only cultivated their fields but also the bonds that tied them together. As harvest season approached, laughter grew louder and friendships blossomed like sunflowers stretching towards the sun. But deeper in the shadows, the thieves worked tirelessly to nurture their own plan. Fueled by humiliation, they conspired late into the night, frustration intertwining with a sense of vengeance. The ringleader snarled, his voice venomous. The town remained unaware of the brewing storm until one night they spotted movement in the fields. Tom had been at his post, eyes scanning the perimeter as the air thickened with tension. The shadows moved stealthily, and anticipation coiled tight in his chest. He whispered, heart hammering in response as the dog stood to attention, sensing danger. The chilly night air buzzed with energy as he brought the pitchfork close, prepared for a fight. The band of thieves crept closer, emboldened by the belief that their prior failure was merely a fluke. Time and determination had softened the sting of their fear, thickening their arrogance. "This time we'll not be chased away," one of them hissed, confidence swimming in the depths of folly. Tom stood firm, now part of a larger network of unity and hope. He could hear the whispers of his neighbors on watch nearby, ready for the signal. Just as they had agreed upon, a single light would flash from the barn illuminating the darkness, rallying the guardians of the land. When the signal was given, they sprang into action like a coiled spring released, ready to defend what was theirs. Tom shouted. The chaos erupted once more, the air filled with shouting and barking as Duke charged forward, a fierce guardian of his master. The fear that had once defined the night shifted dramatically, transformed into unwavering courage. Some of the townsfolk hadn't even seen the thieves' faces as they stumbled through the tall grass, caught in their own web of deception. As shadows collided with light, their confidence shattered and panic took hold. One thief shouted, desperately trying to rally his comrades. The ringleader, filled with desperation, turned to flee but realized they were trapped, caught between unity and despair. He screamed, retreating into the darkness, limb by limb breaking away from their ambitions. In the aftermath, as the dust settled, laughter and cheers erupted. Tom and his neighbors stood tall and defiant, courage radiating from every pore. They had faced the darkness once more, and this time they had emerged stronger, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. The warmth of community enveloped them in a brilliant glow. They lifted their spirits with tales of bravery and camaraderie, united in their mission to protect that which they held dear. And in every row of corn, in every hearty laugh shared over dinner, the essence of Willow Creek flourished. Tom looked out across the fields, where shadows no longer spelled fear but freedom and resilience. The band of thieves had thought they could reduce the spirit of a farm to mere pickings. They were gravely mistaken. What they had missed was a truth that echoed through the fields, a reminder that together they would always be stronger than any darkness that dared to approach. With courage woven into the very fabric of the land, the heart of Willow Creek thrummed with life, a testament to resilience etched deep into the soil, undeniable. And as they moved forward, hand in hand, they would face whatever came next, ready to stand as one, guardians of their dreams. The night was cloaked in silence, the kind that wraps around a place like a thick fog, smothering everything in its embrace. At Willow Creek Farm, the only sounds were the gentle rustle of leaves and the occasional croak of a distant frog. But to the trained ear there was something more, a tension, a bubbling anticipation that hinted at trouble. Underneath the cover of darkness, 4 figures moved stealthily through the cornfields. They had been watching the farm for weeks, convinced it would be an easy score. "All it takes is one quick grab and we're gone," muttered Jake, the unofficial leader of this small band of thieves. His voice dripped with confidence that painted over hints of fear. "Look at it, an old guy and his dog." Another one chimed in, his bravado like a mask hiding the tension within. They crept closer, shadows among shadows, the dim light of the farm illuminating their path. What they didn't know was that the old man they dismissed as weak had fought harder battles than they could ever imagine. Tom Miller, a lifelong farmer, was not one to be trifled with. Inside his home, Tom sat on the porch, a worn rocking chair creaking softly under his weight. The cool breeze rustled through his thinning hair as he surveyed his land, feeling every inch of it like a part of himself. Duke, his loyal German shepherd, lay by his side, alertness etched into his every sinew. Suddenly, a low growl emanated from Duke's throat, sharpening Tom's senses. He whispered, leaning forward. The dog's posture stiffened, eyes fixed on the dark expanse ahead. Back in the fields, the thieves had nearly reached the barn when Duke's growl turned into a frantic bark. The sound rang out, metallic and sharp, slicing through the stillness of the night. Jake froze, panic flickering across his features. Before he could respond, Tom burst onto the scene, flashlight in hand, illuminating the faces of the intruders. He demanded, voice steady as steel. What he saw in front of him were faces twisted in confusion and fear. "Just a couple of guys passing through," one of the thieves stammered. But the feigned nonchalance barely masked their terror. Tom stood firm, squaring his shoulders. "This is my land." The authority in his voice was palpable. He had been cultivating this land for decades, weathering storms both literal and metaphorical. There was nothing he wouldn't do to protect it. Duke lunged ahead, barking ferociously, fur bristling. The thieves exchanged nervous glances, doubt gnawing at their bravado. They hadn't come prepared for a fight. One of them shouted, panic breaking their concentration. But it was too late. Confidence and desperation collided as Tom took a determined step forward, pitchfork in hand. He challenged, fearlessness emanating from his being. Realizing they were outmatched, the thieves took off, bolting back into the darkness from which they had come. The sight of Tom standing resolute, pitchfork raised high, struck fear into their hearts. They weren't just running from an old man. They were fleeing from years of hard-won tenacity and love for the land. Tom shouted one last time, the command echoing through the vastness as they fled into the night, shadows swallowed by darkness. Heart-pounding and breathless, Tom knew he had defended his territory, at least for now, but a nagging doubt lingered in the air. The tranquility returned to Willow Creek, each rustle of leaves signaling safety once more. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of purple and gold, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was only temporary. The thrill of the confrontation was bittersweet. He sensed that the band of thieves would return, emboldened and reckless. Days turned into weeks, and while life on the farm resumed its rhythmic pace, the shadow of that night lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon. Tom fortified his defenses, securing windows and doors, but as he did, he felt an emptiness creeping and a loneliness amplified by the absence of community. The small-town spirit, once a vibrant thread in his life, had frayed under the strain of fear. Then, one evening, as twilight descended with an intoxicating blend of warmth and chill, Tom decided it was time to reach out to his neighbors. He invited them over for a gathering, hoping to rekindle the bonds that had been tested. Maybe together, they could create a united front against the looming threat. That night, the farmhouse buzzed with laughter and chatter, the air thick with a sense of unity that had been absent for too long. Stories flowed freely, mingling with the aroma of freshly baked bread and stew simmering on the stove. The warmth of their shared histories ignited something within Tom, an understanding that solitude would not protect him. Together, they could grow stronger. "I heard what happened, Tom," Allen, a neighbor with a hearty laugh and strong shoulders, said as he clapped Tom on the back. "You stood up for what's yours, but just remember we're all in this together." Tom smiled, feeling the warmth of that solidarity seep into his bones. As the evening wore on, plans were set in motion for a watch system, a rotating schedule where neighbors would take turns keeping watch over the farm. The nights of isolation were over. Now there was a collective sense of responsibility, a purpose. Yet in the back of Tom's mind, the band of thieves lurked a creeping shadow of uncertainty. That very night, as laughter filled the air, the thieves huddled together in a darkened bar, nursing their wounds from the confrontation. Their pride stung and desperation festered like an untreated wound. Jake seethed, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "We didn't come all this way to give up now." Motivated by foolish vengeance, they plotted and schemed as evening morphed into night, their voices hushed and conspiratorial. They nurtured their anger, fanning the flames of revenge, their plans swirling like smoke. And as the sun began to rise over Willow Creek, casting shadows across the fields, Tom and his neighbors remained weary yet hopeful. They patrolled the farm in shifts, eyes scanning for movement in the early dawn light. Then came the day they had prepared for. Tom stood at the edge of his property, the early morning haze pregnant with potential, when he sensed something. A stir in the air, an instinct tapping at the back of his mind. And then he saw them, the band of thieves emerging from the cover of the trees, fiery rage igniting their path. Tom shouted to his neighbors, eyes wide, the pitchfork rising instinctively. The thieves weren't pretending anymore. They were determined, driven by anger and a misguided sense of justice. Jake shouted, eyes wild with adrenaline. Tom felt a wave of fear wash over him, but beneath it, a fierce anger flared. The thieves might have thought this was just about crops, cash, and petty theft, but it was a primal battle, one fueled by love and loyalty to all he held dear. He yelled, rallying his neighbors as they fortified their positions, united like a shield against the storm. Tom stood resolutely, knowing that this was more than a fight. It was a stand against everything he had built. And as the band of thieves charged forward, adrenaline screaming in their veins, time seemed to slow. The energy buzzed around them both, and the heart of Willow Creek pulsed with a fervor that could not be quenched. Tom bellowed, voice slick with determination. He counted down, the world narrowing around them, zeroing in on the conflict ahead. 3, The farmers surged forward, a united front, and the energy shifted like an electric storm. With their weapons brandished, they charged into the fray, raising their voices in a battle cry that filled the morning air. And as they dropped their bravado, the townsfolk stood solid as mountains against the wind, unyielding. The thieves, caught in the pulse of the moment, froze. Desperation hit them like a freight train as they realized the full gravity of their mistake. They had underestimated not just Tom, but everyone who cared for this land. There was nothing easy about this fight. The confrontation spiraled into chaos, the air thick with shouts, the clash of metal against metal, woven with the frantic barks of Duke urging the attack. And just as the tide seemed to turn in favor of the townsfolk, a shout broke through the cacophony. "Now, boys," Jake yelled, eyes wild and panicked. They fumbled, retreating into the woods, scrambling to escape the intensity. But Tom, fueled by a fire within, pushed forward, refusing to let them slip away. "Chase them down," he called, rallying his neighbors to pursue the retreating figures into the trees as determination surged. The chase became a frantic dance through the underbrush, shadows slashing against the sunlight. But as they closed in on the band of thieves, an unexpected sound echoed, a deafening crack that split the air. Something had shifted in the woods, and it wasn't just the nerves of the farmers. A gunshot rang out, a sharp report drowning out all else. The thieves had a backup plan, an accomplice waiting just in case failure loomed on the horizon. Tom's heart dropped. In that split second, time felt suspended as confusion blossomed. The townsfolk halted, uncertainty flooding through them, when a sinister voice emerged from the trees. And as the hunters became the hunted, fear gripped the hearts of Tom and his neighbors. Abby, a close friend of Tom's, grabbed his arm, eyes wide with panic. She gasped, glancing around, desperate for direction. But as Mitch, another of the farmers, stepped forward, the cold realization settled in. They stood on the precipice of a storm, one that could wash away everything they had fought for, and a thought echoed through their minds, a lingering question: who was truly in control here? The tension grew heavy in the air, pulsating like an impending thunderstorm, and as the thieves hung back, their own plans taking a sudden twist, the atmosphere shifted. The real question lingered, unspoken, hanging like a blade over their heads. Would they stand and fight, or would fear chase them back into the shadows? In that charged moment, as adrenaline coursed through their veins, Tom and the others faced an unexpected choice that could alter the course of their lives forever. Would they bravely rise against the encroaching darkness, or falter under the weight of doubt? And as the shadows loomed larger, something primal awoke within each of them. They were not just fighting for a farm. They were fighting for their very existence, poised on the brink of destiny itself. The next move would define them all.